Growing up in the evangelical world was very interesting. We always thought of ourselves as having to go and tell people about Jesus, go tell people about God. We looked for the non-believer. We looked for opportunities. Usually they came in the form of a crisis, a major problem in their lives, and that's when we pounced on them and told them about God. But the presumption was that they needed Jesus because they didn't have Jesus. They needed God because they didn't have God. They hadn't prayed that initiation prayer that got them on the inside. And so our world was, they were on the outside, we were on the inside. God was always at work in our lives, wasn't at work in their lives. And since then, I've kind of changed that. Well, I've changed it quite a bit. And instead now, what I find myself doing is, to my mind, far more biblical and experientially much more powerful and impactful in the lives of people around me. And that is that I presume that God is already active in the lives of people around me. I just assume it, and I look for it. So I start, number one, with that assumption. I assume God is at work in the lives of everybody I encounter. Number two, I look for what that is. I try to discern that. Not 24/7, not always that thing happening underneath every time I'm having a conversation with people. It's always sort of a low hum in the back of my mind. But it is. It's much more so these days than it ever has been. And I look for those opportunities, and when I find them, I surface them. And to my surprise, more often than not, people will agree. People will shake their heads up and down that is what's going on. Sometimes it isn't, and I guessed wrong, and I'm okay with that. And I just, okay, didn't get that one right. So I do that because I think that that's much more of the biblical narrative. You find Paul himself, his surprise was that Christ was already at work in the Gentiles, the non-Jews, and he was bringing them to faith, and things were happening. And Jesus himself is our best example ever, right? He says, I do nothing of my own will, but everything that I see my Father doing, that is what I do. Because my Father is always at work. And so Jesus himself is looking around to watch what God is doing and assume God's already at work. And that's what he hones in on and nurtures the life there, right? So he sees it, and then he pours water on it to bring more life to it. He might prune it. He's acting as a good gardener, looking for life and nurturing life within the people around him. Not worried about results, not worried about getting them to sign on the dotted line, just concerned with watching what God is already doing and partnering with God and bringing life, nurturing life, doing those sort of things. I think if we do that, wow, I just think we're going to live in a much more positive world. We're going to feel better about ourselves, and we're going to see a whole lot more results. So that's what I encourage you to do, and try that out and see how that goes.